tried to get that little thing in there and I never hit it.
Well, that was fun.
All right, don't put it in the set list.
You play slightly different chords than I do, and you phrase the word. I sang this song once in my life about 20 years ago at a sing-around, and it's so cheerful. I finished it and everybody sort of looked at me. and I just never sang it again. And so that's the first time we've ever even tried to do that together.
That's right, that's right.
That was funny.
Yeah, it was, John. It was. I'm laughing on the inside.
Yeah.
There's a lot of stuff in the music press and elsewhere that claims that there's some kind of folk revival with a small R going on, because there are folk artists now winning Grammys and winning Brits, and there's a group from down south who sing sea shanties called Fisherman's Friends.
Oh, that's right.
Who've just got a £1 million recording contract with Sony.
Yeah, well, the monks of wherever it was got one too, didn't they?
They did, yeah.
I mean, this is called fad.
Yes, one phase, you know, they're always having these things. But very oddly, Uncut magazine, which is, you know, essentially a rock music magazine, which I bought because it had a good cover disc, and I turned up, this is yesterday, to page 16 and discovered that, which is an article about a folk singer, a very strange traddy folk singer, who died 20 years ago this year. He was a close friend of mine, but you mentioned the first time you heard of John and Tony. I mean, the first time I met John, having known about him, was to do with this man, because I came over to Old Songs.
Mm-hmm.
Do you want to talk about Bellamy, because you've had a lot to do with Bellamy?
I met Peter, actually, in 1970. And I was back in England. I was a student still. I was back in England for Christmas and traveling around a bit with an American friend who was a good friend of his, and he says, we'll spend a week and we'll go visit Peter and a couple of other people, and that's what we did. And then we each went home separately for Christmas. And I think about a year later he came to the States, and Tony and I were doing a concert somewhere. My partner Tony Barrett were doing a concert, and Peter was there. He got an evening off, so we said, do you want to come and do the concert with us? So we first sang with him in about 1971. But he sang English folk songs, he played concertina, he was a huge blues fan, an extremely creative person, a fabulous graphic artist. When he started singing in London in the 1960s, he was in art school, and he did all sorts of things. One of the things he really got into was the poetry of Kipling, and he did about, back in the day they were LPs, he did 4 or 5 LPs of Kipling poetry that he set to music. Things like I went into a public house to get a pint of beer. The publican he up and said, we serve no red coat here. The girls behind the bar, they laughed and giggled fit to die. I out into the streets again, and to myself says I, it's Tommy this and Tommy that, and Tommy go away. But it's thank you, Mr. Atkins, when the band begins to play. The band begins to play, me boys, the band begins to play. It's thank you, Mr. Atkins, when the band begins to play. So that sort of thing, you know. Is that enough of an excerpt?
Oh, it's good to hear that. It's a long time since I heard anybody play Tommy. Kipling wrote a lot of songs about British soldiers.
That's right.
About British soldiers serving overseas when they didn't particularly want to, fighting wars that weren't really their own, and dying unnecessarily.
It doesn't
not in
happen
any way topical.
It's good that it doesn't happen anymore, isn't it?
It certainly is. And Kipling was accused of being a sort of mindless patriot and saying, you know, we've got to fight for the country, whatever, you know, Britain was right. And he wasn't actually like that. And came out in a particular song after a particular event. You might have seen a play on TV a few years ago, 2 or 3 years ago, which starred whatever his real name is, Harry Potter, playing Kipling's son.
Daniel Radcliffe.
Thank you. Kipling's son went to serve in the Merchant Navy during the First World War, and on his first trip out, the boat was attacked, and then he transferred to the army, and I think it was at the Somme, but I should have looked it up. His first encounter with the enemy, he went missing in action, and Kipling, who was the poet of the nation, was faced with the problem of, you know where we're heading with this, don't you?
I do.
Was faced with the problem of how do you react to such an enormous personal loss when the nation thinks your job is to celebrate the country and write poems, which might also be songs, that raises people's spirits, that are patriotic. And his son was called Jack, and Peter Bellamy, who we were talking about, took this little poem that Kipling wrote about hearing that his son had died and turned it into a song, which Deborah sings, so I'm going to risk the emotion and ask her to sing it.
Have you news of my boy Jack? Not this tide. When do you think that he'll come back? Not with this wind blowing and this tide. Has anyone else got news of him? None this time. For what is sunk can hardly swim, and he gave to that wind blowing and that tide. Oh dear, what comfort can I find? None this tide or any tide, except he did not shame his kind, and he gave to that wind blowing and that tide. So hold your head up all the more, this tide and every tide, because he was the son you bore, and he gave to that wind blowing and that tide. Have you news of my boy Jack? None this time. When do you think that he'll come back? Not with this wind blowing and this tide.
You've both got, I was going to say new albums, but they're relatively new albums. John, your album is called Sea Fever.
Sea Fever, it's all sea songs.
And it's on your own label.
Yeah, well, you know, you can't sign a contract with a major label to sing traditional English folk songs in America.
No. Well, it's quite hard in
this country as well, yeah.
So, but I mean, you are the person running the record label, so that raises the whole issue of distribution and sales and getting everything out.
Well, we thank the internet.
He's the mogul.
Yeah.
That's what I'm trying to get him to talk about. His usual modesty is keeping
the magnet. I don't do much. I'm very lazy. But
it still sells all right.
Well, I sell a few. Yeah. There are places where you can find it and buy it.
And Deborah, a less obvious title, because Sea Fever kind of tells you what the album is, but Fond Desire, Farewell might have people puzzling, unless they're really excellent sleeve notes.
Would they be written by Nigel Schofield? But
well, this was an album that I have wanted to make for a very, very long time, and I'm the kind of person that needs lots of feedback. I'm not the kind of person that just goes in and does something and says this is right. This is going to be great. I go in there and I say, what do you think? And I like to know what other people think of my work, so that I can make it better. I don't really trust my own instincts, but I've learned as the years have gone on to trust them a little better. But I still like to have that third person or that third pair of ears saying to me, well, you know, you should do this, and maybe you might want to think about doing that or whatever. So my first two records, I did not use a producer. I was the producer. I was, as we call it in the biz, self-produced records. And the very first one was actually done totally blind, not really knowing what I was doing. And it turned out okay. This last record, Fond Desire, Farewell, I decided to spend the money. And I'm going to make no bones about it. It was a very large amount of money to make this record, and hire a producer. And I hired Dave Maddox, who used to be the drummer for Fairport Convention, and he agreed, which totally blew me away. I didn't know him at all. I mean, I knew of him. I've been listening to Fairport for 30 years, and I thought, oh, he's not going to want to work with somebody like me. You know, who am I? So, but I go by the philosophy that it doesn't ever hurt to ask, because the worst they're going to do is say no. So I called him up, and I said, I'd be interested in speaking with you about producing my next album. And he said, let's have a chat. So we had our chat, and decided that we would do an experiment. We'd do 3 tracks, start to finish, just to see if we could do this without killing each other and if we could work together. And we did. It was a very efficient process. It was the most amazing process for me, because I really saw how things should be done and how to get the most bang for your buck. When Dave said something was going to take 3 hours, it took 3 hours, and there was no messing about. We went into the studio, we did it, it was done. You know, we didn't waste studio time on practice or arranging. All of that was done before we spent the money to record. So we decided to do the record and do a full-length record. But during that process, I had the unexpected death of my younger brother, very unexpected. And by that time, the songs had already been chosen and the arrangements had been worked out. And I was starting to learn the songs to sing them in the studio. And as I was learning these songs that we had chosen, I started realizing, and maybe this is projection on my part, where I'm thinking, you know, maybe it didn't have anything to do with this, but I'm thinking, wow, that's like Michael. That song is just like Michael when he was doing this, or it just seemed like my brother was coming out in these songs. And I was talking to you, I think it was, and we were talking about the material, and Nigel said, well, it's a bit of transformation through devastation, because all of these songs deal with people in situations who go through some kind of major transformation in their life. And that's where the Fond Desire, Farewell came from. Aeschylus, actually.
Yes.
Aeschylus.
Like quoting an ancient Greek on your sleeve too.
Why not?
I did say I was going to ask you to play a song from that, but I shall nip back and say play alcohol later on.
Oh.
We seem to have got into a rather alcoholic theme tonight. This afternoon. But anyway.
Yeah, I wonder why.
But I did say I'd throw it on for questions, and I know there's a lot of the first year journalists who need and want to ask you questions, and we're a little behind schedule, so going to put that in later. But over to you, ladies and gentlemen. The floor is yours. I will just sit to one side and let you fire your questions.
Do we get to choose, or are they going to just...
We'll wait for a volunteer.
I've actually got a question. You mentioned Peter Bellamy earlier on. Nigel was telling our class yesterday that you'd done a gig somewhere, was it Keighley? In a place that he was quite revered.
Yes.
And you started to play a song in tribute that he pulled out of it.
Well, you didn't actually start a song, but we heard the first couple of notes from John.
Oh, from John.
What?
You got on the note and you played the start of Tommy and then had second thoughts and went somewhere else.
When?
At Keighley.
Did I?
Yeah.
Pack of pipes.
We talked in the afternoon about would it be okay to do a Bellamy song. Actually.
I know, and then I got to the end of the concert, and I realized, well, that's all right. I got through that. I didn't even mention Bellamy, and you know, because it didn't come up as we were working our set list as we went along. I don't recall that I actually did that.
About 5 people mentioned it, and I noticed it myself.
So that's my take on that. That I didn't even know I'd done it.
Right.
One of the interesting things about Bellamy and Kipling, though, Kipling, I have a fairly close geographical connection to Kipling because he married an American woman from the state of Vermont in New England, and built in the early 1890s. He built a house called Norlaka, which was the title of one of his novels, and he built it on the side of a hill in Vermont, and lived. It took him a couple of years to build. He lived there for about a year. He had a bit of a row with his brother-in-law, who owned adjacent land and was always trying to borrow money from him. And so he packed up the family, moved to England, and never went back. But that house that he built was restored fairly recently, and my partner Tony and I, he does live in the town where the Kipling house is. I lived very close by, but I moved into New York State. We have sung several times at Kipling's house, doing programs of Kipling songs with the settings that Peter made. Peter was a very influential person, and when he died, it was a great loss.
Next.
Deborah, hi. You say that you don't write your own songs, but listening to a couple on YouTube, there's such a strong connection between your voice and the lyrics. How much input do you actually put on a personal level about the way the songs are sung?
I try to, I always say that I see the movie when I'm singing. And if I can see the movie, then I feel I'm completely inside the song. Memorizing lyrics is also a huge part of it. I try not to use words, because a Scottish traditional singer told me that when you have the song memorized, then it becomes a part of you, and you can insert yourself into the song. Personal experience comes into it a lot. I relate personally to a lot of the songs, and I can find places, experience I've had in the past, and I might find those in the lyrics of some songs. So, did that answer the question? Okay, good.
Middle one? Yeah.
It's a question for both of you. What is the most spontaneous gig that you've ever played in your careers?
Right here.
Yeah, right now.
What do you mean by spontaneous?
As you have your gigs set out, say like either in the UK or in the States, have you ever had a time where somebody's asked if you can just slot another gig in somewhere in a town or somewhere that in a small venue or a really big venue, just for one night?
Well, that's pretty much the way a folk musician's tour is put together. They're one-offs. I mean, it's just gig per gig per gig. And a lot of times, if I'm understanding correctly, the gig that'll be slotted in the off night is because of a miscommunication between the organizer and myself. We have a gig in Waltham Abbey that apparently the organizer thought she had sent me an email and she hadn't, or I had not received it. And we put an advert in one of the folk music magazines in London, and I got an email from her, and she says, "I saw your advert in Folk London, and we're not on the schedule." And I said, "Well, I'm thinking, I didn't say this, but I'm thinking, I don't even know who you are." So, and it happened that we had a night off, so we were able to put the gig into the tour. But as far as scheduling tours, it's you have to contact each organizer, and especially in the UK, well, anywhere really, routing is very important. You don't want to be doing a gig in Sussex and then the next night have a gig on the borders. And sometimes the British musicians come over to America and they'll think that the distances are the same as over here. And I think you tell the wonderful story about Martin Carthy.
Yeah, Martin Carthy I suppose he is the most famous English traditional singer. And he hadn't been to America. And he got a booking to do 2 nights in New York, but they were not consecutive nights. There was a day and a half's gap between them. So, being a musician, thinking, if I'm going all that way, I might as well book some more gigs in. He hunted around to get another gig and booked himself into a gig in San Francisco in between the 2 gigs in New York. Then somebody said, well, actually their map's a bit different in scale to ours.
just a little bit. So routing is important.
And knowing Martin, you probably thought he could get a lift as well, because he didn't drive.
It's only a 6-hour plane ride each way.
And not back then, though.
Right, well, that's if you can get a direct flight.
Yes. Okay, any more questions? Yeah.
You mentioned that you were a teacher before.
I was,
What inspired you to leave teaching and follow a career in music?
I've always wanted to sing. Ever since I can remember, I've always wanted to sing. And I think I was always getting messages, subtle messages, and actually quite overt messages from my parents and from society in general, that the arts is not something you want a career in. And you'll never be able to support yourself. You'll never be able to make a living. You need to do something where you have a guaranteed paycheck. And, especially in the States, if you have a job and employment, that's how you get health care, because we don't have a national health service like you have here. So all of those messages were bombarded to me as I was growing up. And I did a lot of singing in my younger days, and could barely make my rent, barely pay my bills, and decided, well, let's finish university and go into teaching. At least it's a steady paycheck, and I loved learning. I did like teaching. I enjoyed teaching, but singing is what I've always wanted to do. And when I was 40, I just said, life is too short. This is the only go-round we get, and I need to be doing what I want to do. And one of the, remember earlier I said I have to have feedback. And one of the things I did was I asked musicians who were highly respected in the folk music field, I asked them, I said, be honest with me. Do you think I have the chops to make it? Well, not make it, but at least, because you don't make it in folk music. But do I have the chops to at least be a little bit successful? And I'd say, be honest. Don't think about my feelings. I need to hear the real truth. And every one of them said, yes, you can do it. But, and there was always the caveat, but it's very, very hard. And it is extremely, extremely hard, and takes a lot of time and a lot of hard work. And I'll add to that being a full-time musician and doing all the business, I wear all the hats. I'm in front of the computer all day, and sometimes a fortnight will go by and I won't even pick this instrument up because I'm doing the business all the time. So.
Okay. Any more?
Question for John. How would you describe your relationship with Tony Barron?
We've worked together for 40 years. Some people don't know which one is which. We still work together, and we're very good friends. I live about a 2-hour drive away. We play in a Christmas program that we first developed. This is all ancient history. We developed a Christmas program in 1975 that we started doing, called Noel Sing We Clear, and it's very strange for America because we sing a lot of traditional English folk songs on a Christmassy theme. We do a lot of carols, but these are folk carols, not the ones that everybody knows. We do a number of songs that go with English midwinter customs, you know, nice ones like going out on Boxing Day and beating a little wren to death and things like that. We always put that one in. And in the middle we do what's called a mummers play, which is, again, sort of done traditionally in odd parts of Britain, and it's a death and resurrection play. It's a comedy. There's a quack doctor. There's a fight. Sometimes it's with St. George and the Turkish Knight or whatever, and somebody dies, and then sometimes the doctor brings him back to life, or sometimes the doctor can't, but there's a jester, there's a fool, and he brings him back to life, and it is supposed to represent the death of the land in winter and its rebirth in the spring. We've always done one of these. We have 4 people in our show, so we've always done a mummers play with 4 people. And so when you're on the road with somebody, things go up and down, and they have over the years. But we've always been very close and very loyal to each other, and we still are. Tony has MS, so he's now permanently in a wheelchair. So we don't work as much as we used to, but we still did a concert together right before we came over here, and we've got a few more lined up, and we'll be doing our Christmas show again.
It was a very good Christmas concert online, actually.
I was about to say, if you want to see some of our Christmas show, I don't know what it's the Millennium Stage at the Kennedy Center, and they have a concert a day, 365 days a year. It's an hour long. It's a free concert, and all their stuff is archived online. And if you do a Google search for Kennedy Center, spelt the American way, Millennium Stage, you'll find it, and our show is called Noel Sing We Clear. That's Noel, W-E-L-L, spelled the English way, and everybody over there thinks we're nuts. And last year's show is on there. There's no mummers play because we only did an hour's program. But we get on well. We do all right. We get on well.
Okay, I had a couple more hands here.
How was it you two actually met?
I can't remember.
Well, as I said before, I've known of John and Tony's music for many, many years before I met them. I had gone to a concert. I had just moved to New England.
Was it New Bedford?
It was in New Bedford.
Okay.
And John and Tony were doing a concert of maritime songs at the New Bedford Whaling Museum. And that was where I first met John and Tony both. And then in the years that would follow, we would run into each other at folk festivals. and be on the same stage in workshops, and we've just become friends. And
Yeah.
yeah.
About 2 years ago, we were both booked, because I don't just work with Tony. Tony has been a full-time university teacher, and now he's pretty much handicapped. He doesn't work so much anyway. I've always worked solo as well, because I've been mostly a musician, although I do other work, slaving in front of the computer. But I was booked to play at this little folk festival in Illinois. This is, now think American distances, this is west of Chicago, where Deb has just come from. It's a 2-day drive. You know, you don't want to drive the whole thing in one day. You want to stop over somewhere. Plane fares are expensive, so I said Deb was playing there, and we live relatively close together. If she drives there, she drives right by my house. So I said, "You want a carpool, and we'll see if we can find a couple of little concerts along the way." So she said, "All right," and so that's what we did.
And we had a great time.
And we had a couple of nice concerts.
Yeah.
They more than paid our travel expenses, so we saved 2 plane fares.
Yeah.
And
yeah. But he was actually dropping hints about coming to England.
no, it wasn't.
Yes, you were.
Was I?
Yes. I'm younger. I have the memory.
Oh.
Okay, any more questions? I think we probably went to the journalists, haven't we?
What's been the highlight of your both careers so far?
Of our careers?
You can't say today.
Oh.
The smarmy answer.
Oh. I've had a number. Well, first of all, working with John is, I know, yeah.
Oh, the other smarmy answer. Go on.
Is just fantastic. I think I've had a couple. One is been, I was included on the Richard Thompson box set that Nigel was instrumental in putting together. That was definitely a highlight. And the other has been working with Dave Maddox in the studio. And that relationship has begun. It's a relationship that's going to continue, and I've learned so much from him, but his name has opened many doors, and it's I would say working with Dave Maddox has been probably one of the highlights.
It's always something that's fairly recent, because it's not that one supersedes another, but it's the one that you remember. But this last summer I got invited to the Newfoundland Folk Festival for the first time. I'd never been to Newfoundland, and I got invited to the Folk Festival. They were celebrating 400 years of the first British settlements there, and other people that were invited were, we brought their names up, Martin Carthy and his wife Norma Waterson. And you may not have heard of them, but they both got, is it MBEs?
Yeah.
They've both been given separately MBEs for their work in British folk music. And I did a sort of song swap workshop with the two of them, and just singing songs 1, 2, 3 for an hour in a packed tent, and that was wonderful. And the rest of my trip to Newfoundland, because I got to see a bunch of the whole island, including one of the most beautiful state parks I've ever been in, including a place where the Earth's mantle is pushed up through the crust. So there's this sort of, it's known as the tablelands. There's this flat rock that nothing grows on, because it's a heavy metal rock. And just seeing that and seeing the place and the whole island was what folk music's about for me. I had a great time singing the folk music, but then I got to meet a number of the people, and I got to see a new culture and new scenery. It was fabulous.
Okay, any more? Just I'll get the journalist in first because we are running out of time.
This question goes to Deborah. Are your songs based on your personal life?
Well, I don't write the songs, so so I don't really have a basis. I choose my material I look for songs that have really good word poetry, good imagery, vivid imagery, and of course good tunes. I tend to hear the music first. So if the music catches my ear, then I'll pay closer attention to the lyrics. But I'm finding that as I listen to songs from other people, I have to give them 3 or 4 listenings. I didn't like Richard Thompson at first when I first heard his solo stuff. It took me a good year, and then I was hooked. But I had to listen to it repeatedly.
This is for both of you. Out of all the different places you've visited while you've been on tour and performed, which has been your favourite place?
Well, you have a lot to choose from.
I have a lot to choose from. I have a couple. Every year I go to my local folk festival, which is one of the few festivals in America that presents mostly traditional singers. And we put this on every year. I have a hand in the planning, and I just think this is a great festival. The other thing I do every year, whether I'm hired there or not, is go to Mystic Seaport, which is and they have a sea music festival. Mystic is on the coast of Connecticut. It was a whaling port. They've got one of the old whaling ships there.
The last one.
The last one.
The last one in the
of
world.
The old ships that actually went out whaling, the Charles W. Morgan. They have a wonderful sea music festival there every year, and I sometimes get hired there, but sometimes I don't. And I go whether I want to or not. I just love that festival.
And I've started going to Canada in the last year. I've been in Ontario, and last summer I also went up to Nova Scotia, and I'll be going back up to Nova Scotia for a festival in August. And I said they grow the nicest people in Canada. I've never met a group of people that were so nice and so accommodating.
There's an old joke. How do you get 40 drunken Canadians out of a swimming pool? You say, "Excuse me, will the Canadians please leave the swimming pool?"
That's it. That's it. I was just enchanted by all the people I met and all the people who were just. I happened to be, my accommodation in Toronto fell through, and I was 4 days in Toronto, and I emailed another folk singer that I knew up in Toronto, and she had an accommodation for me within 2 hours. I got an email back saying, "Oh, Mr. and Mrs. So-and-so will take you in. They'd love to have you." And it was like automatic parents, you know. They did my washing. It was amazing. What can we feed you? You know, I just felt very well taken care of. I also have to say, though, over here, I come over here every year. Sometimes I come over twice a year. Sometimes I come over for certain birthday parties as a surprise. And I'm very well looked after. We're both very well looked after over here. I was stranded with the volcano incident last year. I had to spend an extra 10 days. And the folk community just, my email box was filled with invitations to come and stay. You know, "Oh, we heard you were stranded. You know, if you need a place, you know, we're here." So, very well looked after.
Yeah.
Although you sing folk music, what's your opinion on today's music talent?
Today's music talent. Considering I don't listen to it, I really don't have an opinion.
That's a fine answer, that's fine.
I think some of it is very good, and some of it, I really object to driving around my city and hear, you know, having gangster rap coming to me out of somebody else's car 3 blocks away. When they with the big speaker, when they come by, feeling my house rattle. This I object to.
This is for John. What part of making music is the most rewarding for you?
I enjoy trying to relate to an audience. When I sing a song, I sort of get into the song, and I try to bring my audience in with me. And if I can succeed in doing that, and having a bunch of people listening to the story that I'm trying to get across, and some of the feelings that are in the story, because I think English folk music, the thing about it that appeals to me is that it relates very closely to the nature of the human condition, and I can't really put it more specifically than that. And if I can sing some old ballad in a way that people listen to, that really makes me feel good.
Hey. Yeah. Have either of you got any plans for the future after this?
I missed the question.
Have you got any immediate plans for the future after this tour?
After this tour?
Yeah.
Going home?
Yeah.
Well, yes.
Going home to family,
that's part of it.
They're all upset that we're away for so long.
Right, yes. Well, there's summertime. You've probably got a busy
I got my 2 good folk festivals coming up in June, so that's part of it. I have a whole bunch of I do one of the things I do on the computer is a guitar transcriptions. I take an instructional video, and there's usually a booklet of some sort that comes out with that with guitar tablature, and I work for a couple of music publishers that do this, and they send me videos, DVDs, and I have to transcribe them and work on them. I got a couple finished right before I left, but I've got a pile of work waiting for me at home on the computer.
I'm thinking about another album. But I tend to release albums every 3 or 4 years. I'm not one of these people that does an album every 6 months, and much of that is just due to finances. As I said earlier, it's very, very expensive to make a record, and it's very expensive to make a record the way I want to make a record. So, but I am starting to think about it, and right now it's totally blank slate. So.
I want to do that too.
Make another record?
Yeah.
Yeah, you should.
And my local group of folk singers has got this organization which is called Old Songs. We have a festival and we have a concert series, and we put on productions ourselves. And one of the things we're doing is one of the Civil War, New York State in the Civil War, and I'm going to be involved in this. So I've got to sit down and learn a whole bunch of new songs.
Which side are you on?
No, that was the Union song.
All right.
Which side are you on?
Actually, speaking of Union.
In New York, we're Union.
Yeah, yes. Speaking about Union, you are...
Oh, yes, I'm a union boss. We have our musicians union in North America is the American Federation of Musicians, which was founded over 100 years ago, and we have various locals, geographic locals, and we include all of North America, and also Canada is part of the American Federation of Musicians. My local is Local 1000, and I'm on the executive board of Local 1000, and we are called the Traveling Musicians Union because we are a non-geographic local. All of our members, and we're up to about 500 members now, live all over the United States and Canada, and we even have a British member. Billy Bragg is also a member of Local 1000, which I think is very cool. But our mission is to work for better working conditions for traveling musicians and fair wages, because a lot of us in acoustic and folk music, it's very dire. You know, you go into a place and the tip jar is put out there, and it's dependent on people to you know, put a few coins in the tip jar, and we're trying to change those kinds of attitudes and have people who hire us pay fair wages and pay a guaranteed salary. So that's what we do.
Yeah.
It's sort of for both of you. Because obviously like folk music's quite an acquired taste, is there anywhere in the world that you'd like to try to introduce your music to?
That's a good question.
America.
Yeah. Yeah.
I found that folk music over here is much more prevalent and is also much more in the popular culture, especially with the younger people that have been playing traditional English folk music, than it is in the States. It's very difficult to introduce traditional song into venues, into audiences in the States, but we try our best.
I played well with Lisa, with my partner, a number of years ago, quite a long time ago. She played an electric keyboard, and that's what we were, as well as other instruments, and that's what we were using. But we always sang traditional songs, and what we found was that if there was an electric instrument there, the really folky people didn't want to touch it because they didn't consider it folk. The people who would accept electric instruments didn't want to hear traditional songs. They wanted to hear singer-songwriters. So that didn't last too long.
Yeah.
Is there anyone you're hoping to collaborate with in the future?
My collaborations have been with people like Deb, which has been wonderful. I don't have any other plans to do anything. When I come up with doing another record, I have a few ideas of people that I would like to use for a fiddler or something like that for it. But there isn't. I don't foresee any other major collaborations other than the ones I'm working on now. You?
Well, I've as I said before, I've worked with Brooks Williams, who is a wonderful blues guitarist, originally from the States, now lives in Cambridge, in Cambridgeshire. And when I can, I have a guitar player working with me named Bill Cooley. And Bill is Kathy Mattea's guitar player. I don't know if you're familiar with Kathy Mattea, who is a country singer who became quite popular for a number of years and was playing huge theaters and 1,500 seat theaters. And she's gotten back to her roots. She comes from West Virginia coal country, and she's doing a lot more smaller venues and doing a lot more traditional Appalachian folk music. And he's beholden to her. But when there's a gap in the schedule, and if I can make it happen, Bill works with me on some gigs. So, and other than that, I'm hoping to. I would love to have a band, but we'll see.
Well, there's one thing. If it happens, it would be great. John Doyle is an Irish guitarist. I met him years ago. He does a lot. He's been Joan Baez's music director for the last few years. So but he comes from Dublin. He's been out of the cycle. And he's produced records with another Irish musician over there named Mick Maloney that I've often worked with. The last time I saw Mick, he says, "Oh, we ought to get John and you and me together and put together a singers tour." And I said, "Yeah, that'd be great." Because John is just a fabulous guitarist and Mick is a great Irish musician. And then there's me.
Just time for a couple more, so yeah.
These questions for John. What inspires you to sing about sea shanties?
Well, it's one of the... Initially, I think it was one of the things where it's very easy to sing a bunch of sea shanties as chorus songs. One of the things that I've always liked to do, and we've done in the States to some extent. When I was a student, we'd sort of take over a pub with a few people and have a sing-song, and these would be chorus songs that we'd be singing, songs that, you know, people could join the chorus of. And sea shanties have very much a part of that. They've got easy choruses, everybody can sing along, and they're interesting pieces just as songs. But the folklore of sailing ships is just a wonderful thing, and as I gradually got into that, and I was being invited to do concerts at places, historic seaport areas in the States where they have some of the old tall ships. There's South Street Seaport in New York City, and there's Hyde Pier in San Francisco, and then there's Mystic, Connecticut. Then there's New Bedford, which was a whaling port. And I'd get invited to places like that, and it seemed appropriate. And I just got very interested in the whole lore of shanties, the way they were used on ships, and that sort of thing. I'm not a deep sea sailor myself, unfortunately.
Do we all know what a shanty is, by the way? Because you spell it with a C as well, don't you, on your sleeve notes? Rather than an S shanty, a C shanty. You've pardon the pun.
Well, yeah. It's spelled differently. A shanty is a sailor's work song. And what's an example? As I was a-walking down Paradise Street, way, hey, below the man down, a saucy fair damsel I chanced for to meet. Give me some time to blow the man down. They were used on the old sailing ships, not in the Navy. They weren't allowed in the Navy. They were felt as bad for discipline because the person singing the shanty tended to make up scurrilous verses about the officers of the ship as they went along. But what they could do was coordinate the pull on ropes. The other thing about the Navy was that the Navy had huge crews. The old wooden warships, they needed huge crews because they had gun crews that were sitting around doing nothing a lot of the time. They had Marines with small arms. And because a lot of people got killed, I think they had a lot of reserves.
Yes.
So they didn't need the coordinated pull on the ropes as you were bringing the sails and the spars up and down. The merchant ships used as small a crew as possible because they had to pay the crew. So they got away with a very small crew. And when you've only got a few guys on a line, you really have to coordinate it. And these are not nice nylon sails. It's very heavy canvas. If it's wet and blowing and freezing, they are going to get very heavy. And this is a thing. And there are other tasks on the ship, like bringing up the anchor, putting around the capstan. And shanties were developed to do all these tasks, specific kinds of shanties. If you were out on a spar, standing on the rope beneath it, taking in the sail, you'd be leaning over the sail, and at some point you'd all go. So you'd get a shanty like, to me, way, hey, hey, ah! Will, and that's where the sail came up. We'll pay Paddy Doyle for his boots. So, getting interested in the whole folklore of how this stuff was done, and they were really only used. I mean, by the middle of the 19th century, there was still a lot of sail, and there was sail till the 1930s, commercial sail, but it was really being phased out by the middle 19th century, and steam was taking over. But it's interesting stuff, and there's a lot of places in the States that this sort of stuff is done, and in this country, sea song festivals.
Lancaster.
Lancaster had a big one. Liverpool has one. Portsmouth.
Any more?
Out of the two instruments you have with you today, which one do you prefer to play?
It depends entirely on the song. The reason I carry different instruments is that I think some things sound better, or the rhythm goes better on one song, on one instrument than on another. And so it really depends entirely on the song. There are a lot of songs that I'm going to sing with no instruments at all.
Okay.
So, you know, it really is depending on the song.
And on a bit of a sad note, I was just wondering, are there any sort of opportunities that you wish you'd have taken, you know, throughout your career, missed opportunities that you wish you'd have done?
Yeah, I should really have got a job.
I should have upgraded to first class when they offered it to me last year.
I don't know. I in a sense, Tony, my singing partner, has always had a job. He's been a college teacher. So we've never really tried to go out and do long tours, get an agent, do long tours, make ourselves famous. We've always sort of worked more locally on weekends. Do I regret not sort of, well, in England it would be called going professional, wouldn't it? And I don't really regret that. I'm kind of happy where I'm at.
I wish I would have started earlier. I wish that I do wish that I had that knowledge that I had at 40. It's really true. With age comes a lot of wisdom. That this is what I really wanted to do, and because I've never been happier than when I'm singing, and every year that I was not singing, I was just getting grumpier and grumpier and grumpier. So I think if that would be a missed opportunity, you know, it was that when I was in my early 20s and you know, singing in the bars for tips, that I'd continued and really known what I'd wanted. But you know, this is where it is.
And I wish I'd actually practiced the violin when I was 10.
Well, I wish I'd practiced the piano and didn't quit.
I think we can sneak in one last question if anybody's got anything else. Oh, two hands. We'll take them both.
This one's for John. I was just wondering, how do you manage all of the projects that you actually do? Do you make time for yourself?
Well, as far as a job is concerned at home, I said I got a lot of work, but I can set the time for when I do it. You know, I'm my own boss in that sense. I don't have to clock into an office at 9 o'clock and come home at 5. I think I managed some of it by not getting the work practiced as much as it should be by the time the concert comes up. But I try and work at it. But some things, if I'm learning a song, I'll sing it, I'll learn it, I'll let it sit in my head. I can't bring it out straight away. It has to float around in there for a while. And so the thing is to sort of try and start on something early and let it have its rest periods as you're going along.
Yeah.
The last question.
It's a question for Deborah. You mainly tour North America and the United Kingdom. Is there any other different places you'd like to tour?
Oh, I'd love to go to Australia, and I may have an opportunity. This is in the works. In 2012, in December 2012, I might be going to Israel with Brooks Williams, actually. Brooks and I, the organizers, are talking about bringing Brooks and myself over to Jerusalem. No, I'm sorry, Upper Galilee. So that's exciting. I love seeing new places. I'd also like to go to Europe, you know, go and sing over on the continent. So.
Yeah, we'd all like to go places, wouldn't we?
Yes.
Okay, well, it's getting quite warm in here, so we're going to take a short break. But thanks to John and Deborah for answering so many questions, and thanks to you for...
Oh, thank you.
We're going to take a break till back here at 3. Give you a chance to cool down. When about an hour of just singing, but I think Ruth needs to speak to people first, is that right? So I'll see you back here at 3. I wasn't certain whether you wanted to stop singing, Tommy, or to stop.
Well, you can do it says
Yes. Yes. Well, thank you for that.
Oh, thank you for having us. This is always fun.
Good questions.
Oh, actually, very good questions.
So I'll just introduce you for the song now. Let you wrap it. Yeah, I was going to ask you to sing 2 or 3 things. I just thought My Boy Jack would have a particular impact there. And I hadn't thought how relevant it was to, you reckon, just on the brink of hearing.